can be. So I don't know if I'm gonna do a book review on this because normally when I read books, I would do book reviews on almost said on Instagram, on the Red app, on YouTube, right? With this one, I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna do a book review, but like right now, I'm reading this book by Sindiwe. Almost said Cindy Siwe. That's why I had to look by Sindiwe Magona, right? A beautiful novel that she wrote. Don't mind the background, very messy, and I'm moving in a couple of days, so I'm not gonna really bother myself with like cleaning. But yeah, so I've been reading the book. It's fine. It's good. But like I just read something and I've always known that like education is a big deal to me. I never really realized how big a deal it is. Because right now like I'm thinking how would I feel would I be robbed of an education, like the choice to decide whether I continue or not? Because I feel like to me education is such a duty. It's not just a matter of like, I have the option to go to school, I have the privilege to go to school, and I can decide whether or not I go. But it's kind of like, I'm thinking with like all the degrees that I'm getting, especially like during my master's this year. If I just had my degree, that's fine. You can get a lot done with just a degree, even though it's not necessarily enough in South Africa. But like if you're a person like myself who has no real career aspirations besides that, I just want to do things that I enjoy and profit off of the things that I enjoy. That's like literally one of like my materialistic goals as far as having a career is concerned, right? And that's one thing that like I've kind of like stopped obsessing with the idea that like I need to find what my dream job is. My dream job is podcasting. My dream job is painting. My dream job is spoken word poetry. It's like all the things that I do are my dream jobs. It's just a matter of like getting profiting off of it. But anyway, so this character, the main character, actually it's so wild because like when the story starts, I think that Miseka is the thingy is the lead character, which is the mother of the girl or Nokufa. What's her other name? Shimikazi, because she's like the 10th child of her parents, but like of all 10, she's the only one who survived. So the nine children preceding her never really survived. The mother would either miscarry or the children would live for a couple of months, a couple of weeks. I think the longest that the child survived, I think, was 2 or 6 years, because I remember that they mentioned just before someone started school, and then that's when they passed on. But anyway, she's one of 10 children. She's rather the 10th child, and she's the only one that survived. And the reason they name her Nokufa, this is her grandmother who names her Okufa. The grandmother names her Okufa because she came through death. So that's fine. She was a really favored child by her father. Literally the only child. You would like think that the love that the father would have had for the nine children preceding her was all kind of like vested in her. And of course she never knew her mother. And I think that just said, I don't know, I can't necessarily say I relate with that, but then I can relate with the pain of not having a mother, or rather your biological mother, because sometimes you do miss them, but then, and there'll always be that void, but it's just a matter of like, how intense is it? Because if you grew up with a lot of love, like I did, then you're relatively okay. You're relatively okay. But I just think that, like, I don't know. I often hear people say nothing compares to the love of a mother. I don't know. So cool. Um, so basically, Nokufa or Shumikazi, the main character, right? Which is this child that came through the death of her mother. She basically now lives between Kubalo, which is where her grandmother stays, and Zenzele, where the father lives. But then the father works in Johannesburg in the mines. Cool. So basically, there's like a lot of like back and forth that happens, and before the father finally decides that like he'll work for 6 months of the year and then see the girl for 6 months for the other 6 months of the year, he was basically working for like 11 months and seeing her during December holidays. Cool. um so now what basically happens is he decides that like, no man, I have my livestock is good, in good health, good shape. I can make this thing work. The only thing that I would have to worry about is paying the hard tax and all of other taxes that I would need to pay, but otherwise I'm relatively okay. And he was basically haunted by the fact that like his wife, when she passed on, had asked him to take care of their daughter. And also there was something that like whenever Unogufa played with her dolls, there was like one doll in particular where she would just take the fat of food and put that fat around the lips, but never the food never really entered the mouth. And he was kind of like concerned as to why is it that like she's feeding all the other dolls but not that one doll, right? And he was right, but he didn't want to bring that up because it would be kind of like insensitive to bring it up to the grandmother, especially without evidence, because this is something that she's doing with her dolls, right? So in fact, that is something that um, what is it? Her aunts would do to her, but then her grandma had no real knowledge of that. Anyway, fast forward, a lot happened in between. But anyway, fast forward years later, um, the girl is doing really well at school, and she also sees her mom's in visions. Sometimes she can't tell the two apart, whether it's just a dream or if this thing is actually happening in reality. And she always escapes death. And a lot of people believe that like she's not alone. Her dad had a fear that she was maybe a child of the ancestors. Like it's hectic. But anyway, um, we move on, and what happens? A lot actually happens. But the dad realizes that this child really loves school, and also her educators are constantly encouraging her to consider pursuing a career in academia and all of that. And she's quite handsy. She's good with handwork. She's good with like applying herself mentally. So she could either become a teacher, a seamstress, or whatever it is that she would basically want to do. So to her, like, what do they say? The sky is the limit, basically. So cool, that happens. Then at some point, the father, remember, she's the only girl child, and because her father and her uncles, or her father and his brothers, don't necessarily like agree on a lot of things with the dad. Like they don't understand why this man is sending his child to school and why it is a necessary investment. To them it's just a waste of money, because at the end of the day she's just going to get married and basically just kind of like continue the legacy and name of another man, and she's not necessarily going to serve her girlhood home. So patriarchy 101. But anyway, that happens. And then one day when he realizes that like, actually I'm all alone. Like, what happens when I die? This child is not gonna have anyone looking after her. Her grandmother has passed on. She never got to know her mother, even though she sees her mother in visions. So they have some kind of relationship, but the relationship is not physical. I am now sick with TB. No one is gonna be here for this child of mine after I leave this earth. So I have to ensure that at least the material things are in order so that she has some kind of a better life. Also considering how like difficult or challenging it is to exist as a woman in those times. So what basically happens is the father goes to the magistrate's house, and he signs over all his worldly possessions, like all the livestock. I think he had horses, he had pigs, he had donkeys, he had cows, chickens, goats. He had a lot, alcapas, I think is how you say it, and a lot of plants. So he transfers all of that to the child, or Shimkazi. And that obviously starts raising a lot of a lot of caucus, I suppose, caucus meetings, a lot of like talk in the village, and eventually they're worried now whether Bazo Twala Naye, as in like basically just kind of like snatch her and make her a wife. But then what happens, the interesting thing that happens is she gets I think a few years later. I'm just going to measure everything in years because like the timing is not necessarily specific. A few years later, she gets another vision, and her mother is in a bridal dress, and she's walking with like a man much younger than herself. But like she doesn't necessarily know what's happening. Only a few days later, um, there's suddenly like a family who has seen a girl in this household and would like to marry her. Little does she know that it's the man whom she saw in the dream, and only finds out when they actually meet. And it was like, it was surreal to her, like magic. But anyway, cool. That happens, and then fast forward, the father now gets ill. He actually, like, he dies, but then before he dies, and then now becomes, because the engagement was quite long, the marriage only happened after the father had died, but then the whole negotiations were obviously before his death. She wanted to go back to school, but she was worried because now costs and everything involved, as the bursary that she had only covered tuition and not everything else. So now she obviously asks her uncles for help. The uncles who had previously expressed that it's a waste of time to educate a girl child. So their concerns are who's going to pay for food, who's going to pay for transport to get to school, who's going to pay for uniform, who's going to pay for all these things. And she anyway decides that, like, okay, there's now no need for our engagement to be this long, let me just go get married. She gets married to a lovely husband, um has, I think, three children with him. The husband dies at the mines. She's quite young still. She goes back to her girlhood home, and one day she's going to get something from a store. The storekeeper asks her, I see that you're dressed in black clothing. Whom have you lost? Or who have you lost, rather? She answers the bookstore, what is it, the shopkeeper, rather, that my husband. And the shopkeeper's like, pity you did not continue school. Why did you not take the bursary you were offered by the nuns? Miseka, not Miseka, Shimikazi. Shimikazi is like, no, there was no, there was no bursary, there was no scholarship. So then what the shopkeeper says is, no, there was one. I read the message and I gave the note to your uncle. So now she's kind of like, here I am without a husband. I have children, no one to look after me. And I'm now going to have to even fight for my place more than I already do in the world. So now my thing is, I could have went to school. Man, I could have went to school. And at that time, like, careers are there. It's not highly oversaturated as the year 2025. It's not oversaturated like that. Like, it's kind of like you can maneuver your way and find a job. So now here you are. I don't know how old she is. I'm gonna finish, like, I'm still like, I have two more chapters that I need to read, right? And my thing is like, yo, bruv, imagine something that you could have done when you were 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. How old am I this year? 23. And now you're like in your late 30s, I'm imagining. You're in like your late 30s, and now you need to start over. It's never too late to start over. And yeah, sure, life happens, right? But my thing is, The reality that this person was robbed of an opportunity to make a decision for themselves whether they wanted to go and have offspring, have a family, build a life, only for the center of that life to die. Because I mean, part of the center of that life is the man, right? Especially considering that, like, he's basically like the financial provider. Who's going to provide for the children now? I just think it's wicked. I think it's wicked, and I'm glad that I get to exist in 2025. Thank you for listening to my rant. I had no idea that it was going to be 16 minutes long. So I guess this will go to YouTube even though it's in portrait. Thank you.